Hello and good evening. Welcome to our first edition of our brand new webinar format here at Residential Estates Pulse on Property. So before I introduce the three of us, I'll just go through a little bit of what we plan to cover on this brand new webinar format. So the idea is each month to start off with discussing the latest property news, what some of the experts are saying, and go through our own opinions on that as well. We'll then offer the educational side as we have done with previous webinars. So this evening, we're talking about what exactly is buy-to-let property and the different types of property that there is in the different sectors and how that may suit your own strategy. We'll also hope to have guest speakers on each month of relevant different topical things. So it can be mortgage brokers, tax advisors, and please let us know who you'd like to see on these webinars each month. We'll have someone new each one on that. Now, as with our previous webinars, we want these to be as interactive as possible. So please do, you'll see on the right hand side of your screen there, we've got the chat section and the question section. Pop up, let us know where you're watching from this evening. And if you agree, disagree with anything we say, yes, that can happen. Yes. Please do let us know your own story with property. As I say, we want these to be as interactive as possible. So I guess I should introduce the three of us. So I'm Mike Holliday. I'm the Investments Director of Residential Estates, and I've been with the company just over 8 years now. And to my right, we have Paul Winder, Development and Acquisitions Manager. To my left, I have Andrew Brassey, one of our Business Development Managers, both with vast amount of experience and not afraid to share the odd opinion or two on the industry. So yeah, like I said, pop up, let us know where you're watching from, Martin. Hello, watching from France. That sounds a lot better than here, a bit more exotic. Just get back.
Bonjour, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, I had worked that one out. We've also got a guest speaker this evening, Inspire Home Automation Limited, who'll be talking a little bit later on about how to reduce utility bills for landlords, which clearly is very topical at the moment. So definitely stay tuned for watching that. Also, we will have a free draw as well of a prize giving away Apple AirTags, which we will describe what those are yes, later on and do a live draw for everyone watching. So again, stay tuned for that as well. So yeah, let's kick things off. So we'll start off with looking at the latest property news. All these sort of relate to each other really, and I'm sure a lot of you looking at this will have seen some of these news before. People suggesting that potentially we could be in for a slight dip in the market, potential crash further down the line. Nothing new we've read really. We've seen this the last.
No, I think you do find this sort of headline grabbing statements. Probably going to crash, probably booming. It's a lot of these things you take with a pinch of salt, don't you? And put your own interpretation in it.
Yeah.
A bit like the Apple. AirTag. I had to Google it. I had no idea what it was. And when you Google property crash, you get different ideas. And it's what you read into this, I think, isn't it, Mike? That these.
It's also who it affects, because all this information is gained from major mortgage lenders or people like Rightmove, etc. And obviously, it looks worrying, but it is more focused, I guess, at residential property for owner-occupiers. It actually doesn't look at the investment market, so a lot of the properties that we sell that don't go online won't be taken into account on these.
We said earlier, didn't we, there are two markets to the property industry. We specialise in investment property, but then there's the residential side as well, which may take a hit. We will see. A lot of it is dictated by demand, which has not gone anywhere by any means.
No, it's not. It's not. You look at the figures that Rightmove, Zoopla on the market produce, the number of hits that those websites get. It's not decreasing. It's improving all the time.
And people are getting, above the asking prices for properties. That hasn't changed at all either.
Well, I think what we are seeing more and more, I've been in high street estate agents for quite some time before I joined the investment section, And it was always a fixed price. Now we're seeing an awful lot more of offers in the region of, and it's sort of hedging your bets a bit, isn't it? Well, I think it's worth, random figure, 60. I think it's worth 60. Oh, let's try, offers over 59, and we might end up with 61, 63. And it's a polite way, I think, of easing the price up. But again, it's all relative to residential. When we're talking about the investment market, it's a fixed price for us anyway. We work on fixed price, and from there we can make yields. And
they're all different markets. You probably look, but the 4 major cities probably contribute to 70% of those figures, and those are potentially the areas that are a little more saturated. They've got lots of properties available on the market that are having to be discounted.
And I've not seen for a while there, Paul,
secondary or tertiary places.
They used to take London or the M25 corridor out. So you'd have 2 sets of figures. You would have, say, a global country figure or nationwide figure. And then you would have one excluding the home counties.
That's when there was, I suppose, that's when there was a massive difference, though, wasn't there? And this whole levelling up, as people call it as well, has changed.
Levelling up. Is that Boris Johnson levelling up? Levelling the north?
I mean, our job as an investment company is to try and find deals, ultimately, at the end of the deal. So it's one of those. But, I mean, I think if those headlines weren't there and someone sort of said, I get people asking me all the time how you found it, it's buoyant. Because I think still people find property to be the safest way to make their money work for them.
I think there's certain areas, perhaps like you touched on, we would maybe avoid, your big city centre places where these new build developments are coming on. I'm thinking the likes of Manchester City Centre, where we've done it, we've looked at prices and thought, no idea where they're coming up with them. A lot of it, unfortunately, is because they're targeting it towards overseas investors. So it's been savvy in that sense. They could be hit those.
So much, and some of it may not even be towards the investor. You look at, let's just take Manchester and some of the prices we're seeing for say a 2-bed in Manchester, 400, 450 for a 2-bed city centre. That's been driven, I think, by owner occupiers as well. So that for me, they don't work as an investment when you're getting a 3% return, and I'm not sure the capital growth will be there at that 450 level. But they are selling. So you think that there's an indication there is a market, and I think if we are going to see a correction, that might be a better word than a dip, a correction in the market, it might be that type of that sector of the market that we see just easing back. I think when you look at just think about what's sold recently, Hull, Settle, I don't see those areas having the same negativity on price.
Do a lot of work with property data, and the areas where you see a decline in growth are generally the bigger cities. Where they've taken the hit. So the likes of Heswall, Nailsea, all these areas, they're very much on the up because they don't have the supply that is needed for the demand.
That's right.
So there are areas where it will work, but you've got to take all this with a pinch of salt because, like I say, 70% of the numbers are dictated by certain areas that have the most properties. It's always going to be a bit swayed.
But problems can often lead to opportunities as well, and we know it's difficult at the moment for first-time buyers getting on the marketplace, which means that more are going to be renting, which, surprise, surprise, is good for an investor's point of view because rents are going to push up, they're going to make more money on their income they put down. So there are definitely 2 marketplaces in there when it comes to property.
That's right. And I think when you look at property and you read some of these headlines about the negativity of price dipping, you look at property, and if you take properties on long-term investment, it will always work for you.
Always.
But you look at some of the other alternative, we've spoken about on some of our previous webinars, the likes of cryptocurrency. And that's over the past 4 months, would it be, has taken quite a hit. And you think, well, you could have made a fortune. I was reading more about one lad, he was about 19 and he was a multi-millionaire on crypto. The next day, he was down to hundreds of thousands, admittedly, but the millions had gone. And you think, if you own property and you're in it for the long haul, that should never happen, should it?
It's a huge risk to take.
You like to buy something that you can actually see and touch. That's
exactly. So let's move on. So another big area of the marketplace that we've covered the last few years is PBSA, purpose-built student accommodation. We sold a lot of student accommodation, and it's great to see how popular it is now. It has been over the last few years, but in particular this last year, it's really sort of taken off. Probably partly to do with COVID and students not being able to go to university. That's built up the demand, hasn't it? And suddenly now they're coming into the market, needing accommodation, which, as I touched on before, pushes rents up, pushes demand up, which is great for investors on it. But yeah, it's nice to see it doing well, isn't it, that particular sector?
Very much so. And it's not just the new sale, the resales are doing well at the moment. I think people are finding that there's very little stock, as we would say, very little opportunity to buy into development. So look at the second-hand market, and that's improving all the time for us. And you look at some of these figures that are coming out from Knight Frank. It's a very much more of a maturing market. A couple of years ago we were talking about being a niche market. A lot of people didn't know what PBSA was, and I think now it's starting to become more mainstream.
It's one of the big factors. It's part of the fabric now. People see it, expect it. It's coming. People see it as an important sector within the market, a needed sector. It's freeing up housing for people who need housing within the local community. It's attracting overseas students, which are keeping the universities going, and it's very much an area that is seen, which it wasn't 5-6 years ago, as an integral part of an investment makeup.
I think it was Knight Frank did a report on, and we'll touch on this further on into the webinar, HMOs, that if you took all the student HMO out of the marketplace, it would free up, I can't remember the figure, I think it was something like 600,000 homes back into family ownership. And that's really what the government want. And I think it's what we're seeing some of the local councils are aiming at. Certainly Liverpool, Smithtown Road. It used to, back in the 80s and 90s, it was just students, all everywhere on that road. It was students. Now, they've demolished a lot of the houses, admittedly, but they're not there. They're into PBSA. And
students prefer it as well. I'm not surprised about that last paragraph saying research shows students prefer PBSA. We've seen that, haven't we, when we spoke to them. We've had viewings there and we spoke to students around about, they've got the self-contained studio apartments, they've got their own privacy, but then they've got the communal lounges, the gym.
They stay there.
There's a community there.
They treat us at home. They stay there for a while. And just to answer your question, Michelle, that's funny when we say a PBSA, we do say things that we say every day, but they all part, this is just the news, but they're all part of what we're doing is to go through these acronyms. It's all buy to let, but we're going to go through what a PBSA is a bit later on.
Great stuff. So short-term lets, it's something we have done for an awful long time. We managed short-term let property
before we started selling it.
For 12 years, before we started selling property. So it's always relevant. It's always something we're looking at, the latest news. And the latest you can see here. So will England follow Edinburgh by cracking down on short-term lets? It's also saying 1 in 4 short-term lets are illegal. I think from our point of view, from a property management point of view, I think it's something we welcome, the industry being regulated. There's a lot of people trying to do it themselves that perhaps shouldn't be, whether the leases don't allow it or whether they're attracting the wrong crowd. So your hen party stag do's and creating disruption for those living in those developments. The sort of developments we manage and sell, it's very much written into the lease to start off with. Everyone knows what they're getting themselves into. So I think it needs that little bit of regulation. It's a market that's going to get bigger and bigger. We know that. COVID's only strengthened it. This was a market here before COVID. We've often mentioned that. People now aren't always looking for hotels. They like their own kitchens and stuff, and they're traveling. We all use Airbnb. So, it could happen. I think Wales is another area, isn't it, where we've seen potential regulations coming in.
Very much so.
And I think regulation limiting it is quite good because, strangely enough, with short-term lets, the more that comes on the market, actually it detracts from the market as well. So part of what we try and do, and like I say, it's not a product-orientated webinar, but what we try and do is find areas where they don't have any and it needs it. So Edinburgh, London, which obviously already has a restriction, major cities, and there's a lot going on there.
It's a good point. The demand is already there, isn't it, for filming? If this regulation's come in and these 1 in 4 people who are doing it illegally suddenly couldn't, can you imagine what it would do for nightly rates, occupancy?
Push those forward.
It would push it right up.
I think, as a company, we started to look at taking on board, the potential legislation. So a lot of and again, you're right, Paul, it's not aimed at a sales webinar, but if you look at some of what we've sold, the likes of Heswall, Halifax, they are niche developments. 18 units in Heswall. I can't remember Halifax. It was 12, 13. Aimed specifically at this, at the short-term let. So you're not going to get the issues of owner-occupier complaining about maybe a bit of noise going on. It's geared for that. And I think it's a market that we perceive continuing, even with the right legislation in place. And I think probably all three of us, we were talking earlier today, welcome that legislation within reason, to possibly, it sounds awful, get rid of these 1 in 4 that are creating the problem for the 3 in 4 that do it properly. Yeah, very much so.
And we'll touch on it more, won't we, later on in the webinar about short-term let property and the benefits of it. This is an interesting stat. So planning applications falling in England probably doesn't come as much as Paul. You're on the acquisition side. It has been harder to come by stocks, particularly the last couple of months.
Certainly from the ground. So from the ground means off-plan stock. So that is what requires planning. I mean, I think Andrew's been in contact and he's talked to a few people, and from planning through to starting building can take 3 years.
3 years.
And what they've probably done is probably hesitated now because build costs have gone up a lot exponentially since then. So what they planned for 3 years ago when they've gone for planning, now isn't achievable. They can't build it for that same cost. So they probably just wait until this market evens out a little bit.
But then we still have a growing population, still need more houses. So then you go back to the earlier point of, will there be a crash? It's at times very difficult to see if that demand is still there, if they're not building enough properties, it's hard to see it suddenly dropping on that front.
And that figure's changed a bit, I think, hasn't it? It used to be, was it 120,000 homes a year we had to build? I think the last figure I saw was up to maybe 300. So if the planning side of it is easing, how are we going to create those? We weren't creating 300,000 homes a year anyway. How are we going to produce enough property, enough homes for the growing population?
I mean, there's talks of them, isn't there, easing certain parts of the planning process, and I think it is needed. Certainly when you speak to developers, it is.
Very much so. And, we sit on the Bank of England panel, which sounds very grand, and we get an insight into maybe what the Bank of England are thinking with regards to North Wales. And one of the panel members is a regional house builder, and that's where the 3 years comes from. And he said the planning side of it is it's not difficult, it's just so long-winded that you almost wonder why you bother. So the smaller developer might just give up, mightn't they? Can't or take a sabbatical because I've got to wait 3 years or 2 years.
It's a long time.
So it needs streamlining. Definitely needs streamlining. And some of the decisions that the council make, and I talk from personal experience here. I own a plot of land with a couple of my cousins, and it's infill. It should be given planning. Well, that's my opinion. Planning.
They might disagree.
The council do disagree, but they've given planning on a greenfield site, and you think, why are we taking greenfield sites when we've got sort of infill, genuine infill, or brownfield sites that should be developed well ahead of potential green belt? And I can see why NIMBY's not in my backyard. I don't want green belt going. We have got substantial amounts of old industrial land. Just as an aside, talking about Newcastle under Lyme and One London Road, it was an old garage, wasn't it? Bristol Motors. Terrific use of that land. It's just bringing, I wouldn't call it derelict, although it was derelict land, back into use and making a better version of what's there.
We've seen more probably office conversions, haven't we, this last year or so? Probably again a little bit of an effect of COVID and businesses now working from home and not needing the high street presence. So that's going to, I can see that continuing the next couple of years on it. But you're right, Andrew, you'd like to see some new build ones as well in certain sections of it. Okay, we will move on. So let's get on to the, I suppose, educational side of the webinar. And as I said earlier on, feel free to ask any questions, anything that we mentioned. It doesn't sound quite right, or if we went too technical, please do pop up and ask what we mean by that on it. So Paul, I suppose we start things off exactly. What is a buy-to-let property in its simplest form?
As it says, a buy-to-let property is a property bought by an individual or company for the intention to let out to tenants and create an income stream. And right now, I think the figure is there's 2.65 million landlords in the country who are doing this, which then is created. This shows the need for it, the amount of tenants, etc., that are needed, and landlords benefiting from this, showing the bricks and mortar works. But I was just going to say, but what this is about, you buy a property and then you've got the let side. So what we're talking about is the options of letting. And the different
on that side of it. Going back to maybe 2008, 9, a lot of, they call them the accidental landlord, don't they? A lot of landlords came into the market, couldn't sell the property, moving maybe with their job. So what am I going to do? I'll rent it out. And they thought, well, hang on a minute, this is quite a good idea. So I think we've seen a steady growth of landlords or people who call themselves landlords accidentally, who've got on board with the idea of buying property, renting it out on a long-term basis of 20, 25 years, 30 years. And certainly if they put on a repayment mortgage, at the end of that term, thank you very much. And just random figures again, I bought a property for 60,000 and in 20 years' time it's worth 180,000. For which I haven't paid effectively. My tenants have paid the mortgage on it.
I think it's important to point out as well, we see a real range, don't we, of investors, and particularly we've seen a lot more younger investors.
Very much so.
These last few years, haven't we? It's seen, we've often said it on a few webinars previously, it's seen a bit more trendy now than maybe it was a couple of decades ago. And we touched on it before. We had a mortgage broker on a couple of months ago, and he mentioned how in the past you very much had to buy your residential property, have a mortgage on that, to then be able to get an investment property. Now there's more products in there where you can go straight into investment property and carry on renting.
Very much so, and I think also there's a lot more knowledge out there. The likes of us, the three of us talking today about it.
Half decent knowledge.
Well, some knowledge. But I think there's a huge amount of knowledge out there on the internet over possibly the last 10 years. I mean, the first property I ever bought, 1990. Was a furnished holiday let. Can you believe it? Up in Scotland. It wasn't my family home. I lived with mum and dad, and we bought this cottage up in Dumfries and Galloway in 1990. And the Abbey National, as it was then, I only got the mortgage because I did a lot of work with the Abbey National. He loaded it 1% for me, but I still got a mortgage. And you think, that's what, 32 years ago. And it's a lack of knowledge, I think, that I was in the industry. I think if you're not in the industry, you probably don't realise what we can achieve. And I think the internet now is giving people the opportunity to invest younger. I think whilst we're talking about cost of living and the massive cost of living increases, I think there are people out there with a decent salary who can save that deposit and get on the buy-to-let market a lot quicker than maybe 10 years ago.
And I think everyone knows now that, state pensions are going to be in a lot of trouble when they get older, don't they? I mean, you're obviously a lot younger than us too, Mike, and you've invested in property, seeing as that's your future, don't you?
Yeah.
I also think people get confused with the term landlord. You don't have to be an owner of a massive portfolio. It can be someone who's just got a little bit of money saved away and wants them to do something for them.
I think it's quality of life as well. It's been important, hasn't it, these last few years? And do you want to just be, striving for that job and big high salary but working crazy hours, or do you want that little bit of freedom, have that secondary income stream, still work but have that? That's how I see it anyway. But
and I think that element of it, I think again maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was very much maybe more hands-on. So the landlord would be quite active in the management of his property or their property. Now you don't have to be. There are some very good letting agents, residential estates being one, who can fully manage it for you. So you don't get the call at midnight to say the tap's dripping or the light bulb's failed. What are you going to do about it, Mr. Landlord? You can pass all that over to your managing agent. So as a secondary income, you want it to be hands-free. You're busy doing your day job. The last thing you want is 5:30, 8 o'clock, whenever you finish, to then think, oh, I've got to go and do this at the property. No, just
people listening to this webinar will all be passive investors, I would have thought, who've got busy jobs.
Maybe that's a question for our watchers tonight. Are you distinctly as a passive investor, or are you very much hands-on, renovating a property, refinancing it, retaining it, and on to the next one?
It can be a hobby for some people as well. People enjoy it, and we'll touch on it. I think we move on to the next slide just to sort of cover the different types, and we'll go into these in more details. But all of these different property strategies, if you like, suit different people and what they're trying to get out of property.
I think this is where the complication is. There are so many acronyms and so many names that it's like, what are all these? But these are all forms of buy-to-let. They're all properties that are bought with the intent.
The sole intent of letting it. And I think that's the global heading, isn't it? Buy-to-let. And under that,
and they all suit different people and different needs.
Absolutely. So we'll start off with the first, which is probably the most common form of buy-to-let, assured short-hold tenancy, which a lot of you have seen when people let it out to tenants who maybe rent the property for 12 months, sometimes 6 or sometimes longer on it. This is probably the longest standing form of buy-to-let property. It's been incredibly popular, continues to be so.
And anyone who's got a portfolio of any amount will have always started with ASTs. I would have thought, maybe HMO, but because this is all you could do.
Yeah,
this was all the market was. Buy a property, rent it out to a tenant, long term, hopefully, keep it going, stable. Property grows in value, rents increase, your returns increase because your property prices remain the same. Pull money out, etc. It's hard to pick holes in.
It is. You normally put 25% of the property down on it, maybe a 20-year repayment mortgage, something like that. The idea is the tenant covers monthly payments and hopefully a little bit extra for you to have spending money. And you watch that 25,000 or however much it is that you put into it grow, and in those 20 years you can pull it out. You can carry on with the income and not have a mortgage debt-free.
Paul touched on it there. That used to be a while ago. The adage that you would buy the property. Again, random figures, 60k, and pray for inflation. Because once you've got inflation, you'd start to see the property price grow, and then you would pull more money out. So, your 60k became maybe 80k. Well, I'll take that 75% of 80, not 75% of 60, and I'll go again. I've saved a bit more money and I'll reinvest it. And that's how I think a number of investors have grown their portfolio steadily by pulling money out of an existing property that they've seen good inflation in or good growth in.
Which I was just going to say, which then because it's a growth and yield.
Yes.
Factor, and the exit strategy is strong. You've got owner occupiers. You can sell it if you want to sell it tenanted. You can sell it tenanted, etc. You can buy it with cash or mortgage. It really does tick a lot of boxes. There's nothing wrong with it. I think one of the misconceptions about it now is though what you start off with, it isn't the highest yielding investment. Potentially one of the safest.
I was going to say, I don't think there's potentially major cons with it. It's maybe more the other areas have become a little bit more popular.
Yes.
We'll touch on like short-term lets and student property.
It's
probably yield driven, isn't it, that they become more popular? Because I think what we have seen is standard buy to let on an AST. The yields have dipped a bit as property values have gone up, and rents have followed along a bit. But where we were maybe talking base of 6%, possibly now we're talking a base of 4% as a net return. We're talking about 4% is not a bad rate from an AST type of investment.
And the negatives, the cons are the same as any other property. I'd say it's location, picking a location that works. There are two forms of ASTs. I suppose there are yield-driven ones in lower end properties where there isn't much capital growth. It is a high yield. Or then you go into your more standard residential, which will appeal to owner occupiers, where your yields will be lower.
You always want to look at your end user, don't you? So
absolutely.
You've got to look at certain areas. I suppose a con, what you've got to be careful is getting a bad tenant isn't ideal on these sort of ones. It's not like a short-term let where they suddenly move out. So
that's right.
You've got to be careful. But I suppose you get a little bit what you pay for.
Of course you do. There's certainly that aspect to it. But I do think when there is a misconception, I do think it is where you start from. Andrew can vouch for a couple of your property in Manchester. You buy property at X price, don't you? And as rents go, your yield increases. The yield is your return on investment, but you've got to be patient with it. This is medium to long term. If you're in it, it's very rare that you can do something.
You're right.
Very
we have in Manchester 15 years around it now.
And
the rents have started at 575 from memory, and they're now up to 950.
So your yield is almost doubled.
The value is what I paid has remained as what I paid. So you're right. The yield for me has gone high. But if I were to put it on the market, the yield would dip because you're now paying today's price, not
100%.
Not so 15 years ago.
So of the options available that we are going to be talking, and like I said, we're not product orientated. It's just a let. When you buy an AST, it will generally be the lowest form of yield. But you do have that, potential of 6-12 months knowing what
it's a steady income.
It's a steady income. There is nothing wrong with it.
Craig's asked the question, how is the buy-to-let mortgage market now for non-resident UK taxpayers? Relates a little bit to what I touched on earlier, how there's a lot more products out there now, isn't there, on the mortgage side, whether that's first-time buyers looking for a mortgage or overseas clients. We're definitely seeing more products in the marketplace. We've got a couple of really good brokers that we work with that we can, I'm sure the guys back office can send you some links to, or we can send some details afterwards. that would be happy to have a chat, Craig, if it's something you're looking at personally. But yeah, it's definitely, I mean, yeah, we've seen it the last few years, more products on the market.
It's never something we can talk about properly because we're not mortgage advisors, but we can certainly say from the properties we've sold, we know that non-British residents have got mortgages, so there will be options. There might not be as many, but you know,
lower rate to value, loan to value. You know, you might be at 65%, not 75%, but they're out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's why it's added to the marketplace as well, hasn't it? Because we've seen more overseas investors come into it as well on it. So,
so that's an AST.
So moving on to PBSA, which we, as I said, we touched on earlier. Slides are going crazy here. PBSA, which is purpose-built student accommodation. I guess the clue is very much in the name. It's accommodation built specifically for students. So typically they tend to be self-contained studio apartments, so with your own suites, your kitchens, and then with the communal areas, which really do vary, but you're talking gyms, communal lounges, everything like that. Very popular, obviously, with students from their point of view, but also with parents. You know, they're very safe, secure environments.
The
councils prefer them,
if anyone here watching is in a university town or city, you will know exactly what one is, but you will have seen one come up because there's a massive demand for them.
Tend to be cash buys only. Well, they pretty much are cash buys only, mainly because of the size of them. They're typically below 30 square meters on it. So that does obviously put off a little bit in terms of exit strategies, but all it means is when you come to exit, you'd be looking to sell to another investor.
It's back into that investment.
It becomes a commercial investment, but I think one thing to state as well, all of these, it's an asset driven, you know, it's still an asset that you've got. It's a property that can be let out. It is bricks and mortar, you know, so, but it does become commercial. It becomes based on the rent that's being achieved, which is what dictates the value of the property.
Well, I think the other thing to make clear is you do own it. You own the title. So whilst it's within a block, it's like buying a small apartment, isn't it?
It's about a studio.
It's a studio apartment, but it's aimed at the student market as opposed to a bed sit or something like that. It's proper title. You own it. It's registered, and it's an asset that you can sell on the open market.
And the yields can be really, really good. They're a student property. I mean, you know, property prices obviously, because the cash purchases tend to be a little bit lower, between the sort of 60, 80k mark typically. But the weekly rents are fantastic, and they're growing, as we touched on earlier. There's loads of good articles online about it, how they rise, and so the yields based on that.
I think in Keele, I think it's 3.5% year on year. It's increased something like that.
From completion in 2017, it's gone from about 125 to 143. 160 units in there. I got an email off the house manager there today, all tenanted. 160 units, all tenanted, apart from one, which the owner occupier wants to live in it. So going on to this and your exit strategy and the resale side of it, we are finding more parents are buying specifically, certainly likes of Keele. Keele, I wouldn't say it's unique, but it's different to maybe some other universities where it has a very strong medical section. And a medical student is going to be there for maybe 4 or 5 years. They've opened a veterinary course that year, there for 7 years. So you're looking long term. So I think a lot of parents are thinking, why am I paying, £143 a week on 51 weeks, or maybe £140 a week somewhere? Let's buy it, put our son, daughter in there for 4 or 5 years, and it's actually cost effective to do it that way, and then retain it and rent it out to the next student that comes along in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years time. So we're seeing more and more of that time.
And it's also where we focus on areas where they are quite small towns or cities as well, where it's not homegrown. So people aren't, when you look at Manchester, Liverpool, a lot of the students who go to universities there live there.
Make commute. That's right.
So it's, you look at places like Keele and Preston, etc. And other areas you look at, they've actually got a very small base, so people have to find accommodation to do it.
A couple of really good questions have come in. Rajesh has asked, do you think there'll be appetite from lenders in the next 3 to 5 years for PBSA?
Well, there is at the moment. If you are more on a commercial basis, so if you have a single unit, it is difficult to finance. If you have 5, 10, there are commercial lenders out there that will lend. The rate is slightly higher, so you've got to look at the pros and cons of.
We've got one quite big investor, haven't we, of ours, who's done that, who's pulled money from his portfolio of student property to invest in other areas of the industry. So yeah, we may see it.
I think
time will tell.
I think one thing to say about lenders, it's not about the appetite for the property. How lenders, natural lenders work, it's their ability to resell. So what they do is they have to sell it on the open market. So in their heads, it limits where they can go, whereas we sell to investors. And Michelle's asking about the resales. And, you know, I think that we were going to cover this on the misconceptions. Resales are actually very popular, you know, and I think some of the ones that you do see on the market, student property has moved on a long way in the last 5 or 6 years, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know,
but I think you've got to look at the universities as well. And, you know, I mean, these universities have been around, like Keele, for over 70 years. They're expanding. So I think in answer to your question, Michelle, you have to be sensible in terms of those locations on it. A university that is expanding is not looking at moving in a couple of years and then suddenly all this property is going to be left stranded. There's long-term visions there with it. And education is always going to be a huge part of this country. That's never going to change. There's too much money involved in it for
you look at the number of overseas students that come. Liverpool, I think it's 1 in 4. Is it or pre-COVID? I'm not sure of the figures today, but pre-COVID, 1 in 5 students was from China.
Yeah.
1 in 5, and Liverpool has, between the 3 universities or 3 main universities, something like 70,000 students. So you think if it's 1 in 5, get my brain into gear, that's about 14,000 Chinese students, let alone maybe American, Hong Kong, and it's growing. It's growing. Universities are in a difficult situation at the moment. They can't fund the university on purely UK students. They have to go overseas to get that differential. UK students are paying 9-ish K, overseas are about 23, 25K, and and there's a lot of criticism for universities going into that overseas market to get that 25K, but that's how they run the research projects. You can't do it on 9,000. It's not. There's talk, and that 9,000 has been fixed for the past 10 years. There's talk about trying to ease that up. And if we are looking at more overseas students, it's PBSA that they want. The parents want them in something secure. They know where they are. It's got that community feel to it, so that, you know, can you imagine you come from Australia or China, you land on the UK shores for the first time, you get to your halls of residence, and it must be quite daunting. So if you've got people on your course in that PBSA, you're going to feel a bit more comfortable. You're going to feel a bit more at home.
And I mean, I think Michelle's got a point as well, but it's about where you buy, because let's say, so if we took 10 calls and we asked them all the same question, where would you buy PBSA? I can guarantee they'd probably all say Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, Sheffield.
Nothing in
now, that's the problem, because anything that's in close to the universities in a good location will always do well. But because it's been fed to them that these places to go, developers will then start developing further and further out, asking the same prices, and these are the ones that suffer. So you will see lots of student properties on the market not being touched with for a reason, and it's the same reason as you do in residential. You know, you'll see lots of properties in Manchester on the market that aren't being touched for the same reason, that it's oversaturated. So it's about finding the right place that has a strong supply and demand.
Yeah, I was going to say, it comes back to demand. The likes of Manchester, there's so much competition there, isn't there? There's not just purpose-built student accommodation you're competing against. There's other residential blocks as well, HMOs.
There's tons. And we're not anti-Manchester, it's just these are the facts, you know, because as a passive investor, you get fed and that's what developers develop, because they think that's what you want, whereas we want to look for other areas.
And it's key when you, again, it was Knight Frank did a report on student demographics. So, and it's a sweeping generalization. The Chinese will not walk. They had to be, I think, within 5-10 minutes of university. Middle East students wanted to be 10 to 15 maximum. UK, maybe half an hour. Scandinavian, walk an hour. They're used to it. And it's a strange thing. So what Paul is saying there, anything on the doorstep of the university should rent, and you'll rent to maybe a whole spectrum of students. Once you start to ease out of the peripheral of the university, it becomes harder to rent, and therefore the rents dip. And you will always find someone who will rent, again, random.
But they're sold on the same basis as being next door to somewhere else. You know, so. And I was just going to say, sorry, Mark, I was just also going to say that I think we've also got to look at the fact HMO license are getting almost impossible. So you're not going to have HMO students for more and more students are coming in, so they've got to live somewhere.
Yes.
And that's why PBSA will always have this demand.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happened in Liverpool, like the Smithtown Road. A lot of those houses were demolished. You know, they were solid houses. They weren't particularly, and I think this is the other element that well, I'm going off at a tangent here, that the councils don't like. Sweeping generalisation again. Student HMOs generally not particularly well maintained.
Yeah.
PBSA, it's got a proper block manager.
Yeah.
It's well maintained. It's a credit. It's a bonus to the local community because the income that those students are spending in the local town, in the local village. But I think we are seeing that we're getting rid of that sort of HMO on licensing. Liverpool, is it £200 license fee, or is it 400? It might be £400 now license fee you have to have. Well, it just takes something out of the yield, the income you're generating.
It depends on your strategy as well. Like for yourself, Michelle, if you're looking at it from a long-term income point of view, student property is very good in that sense. If you are looking at it from a short-term gain, if you like a quick sale in a year or so's time for growth, student property is not going to provide you that. So you really do have to, with all of these different strategies we go through, look at what you're trying to gain yourself from it.
But if you have a fully tenanted PBSA for 10 years, when people talk about growth, it will have paid itself back.
Yeah.
It's just in yield rather than growth.
Yeah.
You know, so it does have a place, and we find a lot of people buying these. The fact is, if you've got 70, 80 grand sat in the bank, it's doing nothing. Whereas with this, you can get 7-8% on it, then it's managed for you, which is one of the big pluses. It's so hands off, it's untrue. You know.
Yasmin has asked a sort of mortgage specific question. If we have equity in our property, can we use this to pay the deposit and the mortgage? And can we go to most high street lenders for the mortgage? Well, in terms of, we've seen a lot of people recently remortgaging their properties to put into new developments. We touched on one of the investors before that's done that. So you can do it if that's what you mean by it, Yasmin. In terms of going to most high street lenders, again, it really depends on the type of development, the type of property that you go into. You know, there's certain developments in terms of the type of build, or if it's maybe a short-term let property where it's maybe more niche products that you might have to go in high street.
Or the other way of looking at the question is, of course, you go to a high street lender if it's to get the equity out of your property.
Your existing property, yes.
Because so there's a lot of people now buying properties in cash. Now we call it cash, but that doesn't mean there's not a mortgage attached. But what they're doing, instead of getting a new mortgage on a buy-to-let, they are accessing money from an existing property because the interest rate on that is so much lower than a new one. But they are buying the new property in cash, but it's money released from somewhere else that they are paying a mortgage on.
And then what they may do 12 months later down the line is start to fetch some of that cash out of the property they bought from the refinance of maybe the family home.
That's it.
Very quick, Tatiana, you are looking at usually 7% net. Anything above 8 is very good.
But we do a lot of resale property on the student side, and that's the first thing we'll typically look at is what's the rents, can we get to that 7% net mark, and that tends to determine the price, of the resale side of it. So you're looking around the 7% mark. We have had ones, haven't we, recently, just over 9% net, some really good
we have
performing ones. So great stuff. Right, let's move on from PBSA. So HMOs, Paul, you've covered a lot of HMOs in terms of bringing these properties on and selling them in the last couple of years. If you want to touch on this one.
So what is it? It's a house with multiple occupants. So generally it's a residential property that's been converted in one way or the other, sometimes extensively, sometimes not. So to create, instead of a family living in there, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 individual people. And that is done to increase the revenue of the property. Obviously comes with more costs, and I think historically as well, when people did invest, it was either an AST or a HMO, because both could be used by a mortgage, but one offers better returns than the other. And there's two ways of looking at HMOs. I think the people that make the big money are the ones that buy the residential property and then convert and build it into a business, or you buy it as a going concern, which is just as good. But you are buying a business. I think that's one of the things to say. You know, you're buying it based on, again, it's very similar to PBSA.
But the only, I suppose, difference is there are opportunities for mortgages. Like you say, it is more the commercial mortgage. But you know, if you have got that 120, 150,000, and you want it to work on a bigger property, you've got opportunities there. Whereas, I suppose you look at that, or you get to studio.
I mean, even if I reckon for half decent HMO, you can go sort of, if you've got 80 grand cash, it's one PBSA or a deposit on something else, but then you've got a mortgage to cover. It's always very important to remember with HMOs that the yields that you get sold on will be fully tenanted. So if you've got 5 people in a property and one room is vacant, that's 20% of your revenue that's gone. So it's important to have good management. It's important to have, again, good, every single property we talk about, it's about good location. You know, location has been a mantra for years, and there's a reason for it, because it's true. You know, so somewhere it's popular. There is still a high demand for them, especially with professionals now who can't afford to get on the property market. It's certainly not a bad investment.
Tenant profile comes into it a lot, though.
Massively,
you mentioned a good management company. I mean, we see as much as 10-bed HMOs.
Yes.
You're going to be really lucky to get 10 perfect tenants that are always going to pay on time and no problems with it. My student property, when I was at university a few years ago, there was 8 of us in a house. The first year we didn't have a management company, and it was just chaotic. Yeah, you know, it was left to myself at the time to collect the rent from the other students, which there's always someone late or a problem with it. The year after, he thankfully brought in a management company, and it was a huge difference. Now, it would have clearly cost the landlord that, but you would much rather a cleaner year, no costs with it, and no problems.
Yeah, I think it all depends what the landlord's looking for. Are you hands-on? Are you prepared to go? You know, it's local-ish to you. Are you prepared to go knock on the door once a month and collect the rents, or do you want to employ a management company who will go knock on the door for you? I mean, we were talking to someone today.
I was just going to say,
you spoke more to her than I did.
You know, won't go into details, but you know, there are horror stories out there, and this lady's got, you know, 10-bed HMO which lives in a cell. You've got 2 that are untenanted. You've got 5 people not paying a rent, and it almost becomes, the property almost becomes worthless.
A liability. It's not an asset. It's a liability.
Because to resell, it's based on the yield it's achieving. That then dictates the price, and it's nothing near what the price is worth. You know, so again,
she's unfortunately, you know, we don't
talk too much about bleeds, but
to divulge too much information, but it's a business. It's ruled by the head, not the heart. And I think, unfortunately, this person has, by living on site,
been a bit too nice,
and that has worked against her. You know, if, and we're not saying you need to be ruthless, but it is a business. The rent is due to be paid monthly, and you have to collect that rent to make it an investment.
If it was your shop and collecting rent, you would, you know, and it's exactly the same. So you are buying it, but it is, again, old price and yield. So when you buy HMO that's up and going, you will be paying more than what the bricks and mortar as a residential will be worth. So, you know, your exit strategy is going to be investors. Or if for some reason that particular area has grown massively in property prices, you can convert back to residential, but there's a cost associated. That's right. So they do work, but like I say, I bring them on, but they have to meet very strict criteria. You know, they have to hit a certain percentage yield, etc. HMO hotspots, again, it's generally down to areas with a good white collar profile, good quality. You know, there are certain ones that look shabby and are shabby. You know, if you have, and I also now think some of the ones we've sold, there's been less is more. They are homes to people, long-term tenants. So I actually think, Craig, it just depends on a particular house, a particular management company, etc. You know, I mean,
a good industry and stuff as well, where you're going to get a lot of young professionals and stuff as well. Places like Warrington, those sort of areas, where they're not the big cities.
If you look in generics, then they're hospitals.
Hospitals always good.
And I think one of the main misconceptions, because when we say is it growth or yield orientated, this is very much yield orientated. Growth is dictated by rents. So if you have 5 tenants in, you get on well with them, it's great, and this is coming back to be it's a business, but you don't, and you pay X amount for that property, but bought as a going concern, so up and running with management, etc., it's getting X amount percentage back. If you don't put them rents up in 5-6 years, then that property is worth exactly what you paid for it. You know, it's nothing to do with the bricks and mortar, like I was saying. So that's one thing to bear in mind. You've got to keep up with, you know, if utility costs are going up now, then your rents have to increase to cover those. And then once those go down and your outgoings thing, then rents will stay. And that's when you make a little bit of money on the HMOs. So we are very careful about the ones we take on. You know, and we'll get lots of people sort of saying, well, it could be achieving this. Well, we have to price it on what it is achieving, not what it can.
Absolutely. So STL or FHL, there's so many different terminologies for this marketplace. So short-term lets, furnished holiday lets, serviced accommodation. Some of you may know it as. We're a little bit biased in this sense. We've managed short-term let property for over 12 years now, longer than we've sold property for. So we know this market really well. I think to some, they sort of think it's just come about these last couple of years, but it's been here a long time. It's just got a lot stronger these last couple of years. But important to mention, essentially, it is just what we had a slide on previously. It's just an AST property. It's just the lease or whatever it is on the property that allows you to rent it out in this particular model. So whether that be a city centre where you let it out as a short-term let to corporate clients, or whether that be somewhere in the seaside where it's a furnished holiday let, it really does vary. So it's a standard property. You just have this added benefit of being able to do it that way on it.
It's got the potential to get you from A to B a little bit faster than your AST property. And it's sometimes it's quite hard to put an analogy to. It's like if you have a car and it's a nice car, but you can put some fuel in that's half the price, but it makes it go twice as fast. Then you do that.
Yes.
And this is the same. So it's, let's say you've got property A and property B, one's on an AST, one's on a short-term let. 9 times out of 10, that same property, which will go in value the same, exactly the same, no difference, but you're probably doubling your yields on an AST. And your plan B is an AST instead of your plan A.
Yeah.
So I think, and I'm skipping here, one of misconceptions is people think they pay more for something that allows you. You don't, because it's always priced on the asset. It's just giving you options on what you want to do.
And I think the important thing there, Paul, is it's a standard property.
It's
not a hotel room. It's not a care home. It is a standard property that you put onto short term. If that doesn't work for whatever reason, there's a change in legislation. It eases out. You go back to your AST. If that doesn't work, you sell it back into the owner-occupier market. It is a standalone property that is an asset that you can sell on the open market. It's not some strange little product that is a furnished holiday sort of thing.
It's a taboo word. It's actually that we go into it so much. It sounds complicated, but it's so simple. And I hope Mike don't mind, but he's got a very good short-term let property, and the simple fact is your property would achieve £700. On rent, but you get £100 a night on a short-term let. So which one do you want? And that's what it is. And so growth and yield, it's both, because your asset still grows in value, but it can also grow as a business as well as a residential. Your owner-occupier can still buy it. An investor can buy it. It's cash or mortgage. The cons, I guess, are it's not guaranteed.
And it can be seasonal. I think if we're looking at
furnished holiday lets, 100%. Certain areas. Furnished holiday lets get a little bit more emotional. So some of the areas we've focused on where there is a very high demand for short-term lets, and again, we're not talking the bigger cities. Some of the really smaller ones that don't have many apartments, that people need this sort of accommodation. They do very well on that front, and we are trying to think.
They kind of come with their own benefits as well, though. The furnished holiday lets, it might be that you want to use it yourself or your family.
It is more emotional, because you find a lot of people who buy furnished holiday lets are not really 100% focused on the yield. It's something that's paying for that property and giving you a little bit, and also
it covers the running costs, and they can go and use it. And I think we're seeing more of that maybe with people working from home. So as a family, you may go to your holiday home and you may work for a month there. And then, but you think, oh, hang on a minute, I've got to pay the bill. So come home, rent it out for a month. I used to sell an awful lot into the Kuwaiti market, and they would say, well, we come to the UK for 2 months. We come to the UK for summer. Can we use our apartment? Well, sorry, this is years ago. No, you can't. You're on an AST. You can't evict your tenant just because you want to come and use it. Had they had them on short-term lets,
no, you can't.
Absolutely. Block book that 2 month or 3 month window out. The rest of the 9 months, use it as a short-term let. So it has a lot of options and a lot of benefits, and is a lot more flexible.
It's got 2 rental options. It's got 2-3 exit strategies.
Yeah, and it's opened up now on the mortgage front as well, which is great to see. A few years ago, when we first started selling short-term property, it was quite difficult, wasn't it? There weren't many products out there specifically for short-term lets, or if they were, the rates were so much higher than normal buy-to-let mortgages. But that's definitely leveling up now on it.
And everything we look for, it's still the same as we look for standard buy-to-let. So good area, good location. It's got to be to work. So I think one of the great things that people find about this is if you're really nervous about the short-term let market, don't understand it, don't see it, you can still buy the same property that's going to have that growth, but just put an AST in it and let's see how other people do.
Piggyback on other people for the first 12 months, see what they're doing, see what income they're generating.
You've got such a good plan B, haven't you? If you buy in the right areas, you can just do that AST model. So it is quite a good risk-averse, certainly first-time investment. You know, for such as myself, having that backup of, you know, if the market did slightly change, which I don't anticipate it doing that, where you do have that AST, that would more than cover the mortgage on that front.
And then on the misconceptions front, I guess, there are no guarantees. You know, with a 6-12 months, you know what you're getting. But also, I think it's that you can do it on any property. You know, so if you're watching this and just think, I'm going to chuck that tenant out and do it on it, doesn't quite work that way. It's very hard, and that's what we talked about the crackdown earlier.
Yeah,
you know, it takes a lot of work to get it allowed legally.
I think another big misconception is people think your property is going to be damaged by doing short-term lets because they see stag do's, they see empires, and that's how they think it is, isn't it, on Airbnb? Again, you know, use a good management company. That won't happen, and if anything, it should really maintain the standard of the property when you first bought it. Yeah, because such as my property, I've got a longer-term booking in there at the moment, 3-month booking, but it's being cleaned once a week. So someone's checking on it once a week, checking for any damage, you know, lets me know. As opposed to if I just had a 12-month rental in there, no one would see it until they moved out. Yeah, so I don't know what sort of state it's in. So it maintains it, which ultimately maintains its value or helps its value if you do come to resell a property.
Yeah, if your property's in good order and the property next door, which had the ASD, is in good order, then yours is going to get sold and rented first next time.
Absolutely.
And I think just going on to that, and you know, please call us because there's lots we can talk about on all of these subjects. But the other misconception is that they're hard to manage. That you think there's so much work involved. Companies like us, there's loads of companies out there that do this as a job. It is hands off. You don't have to do anything. You can have input. They'll give you advice on what to do with furnishings, etc. But it can all be done for you. It's just, and this is the whole point for this webinar. It's just using a different letting option on the same property.
Yeah, absolutely. We could cover an awful lot more on the short-term let property, but we've got to move on. So, housing association. Paul, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, this is scenario. So what is it? It's a property that is leased to a local housing association, usually, who will then pay you a fixed amount for 3-5-year lease, something like that.
7. I've seen them as high as 7.
A 7-year lease. So you're getting a fixed amount regardless of whether it's occupied. That's their responsibility, and they also look after the upkeep, which sounds brilliant on paper. You know, it's okay, I've got a nice residential property, I've got a tenant in there. And that is, in theory, the appeal. Now, there are some downsides to it, which we find anyway. You know, we're not saying it's right or wrong, but you are dealing usually with the lower-end properties, which then generally means, and again, not trying to generalise, you're dealing with a different type.
Well, it's important to point out we have sold this property before, so it's not like just saying sell that.
But it's something, tenant profile is quite important, isn't it? You know, and the quality of what you buy. It's very much yield orientated, which I'll go on to. Your exit strategy is always going to be an investor because it's a residential property. It's not going to be an owner occupier. It's always cash as a rule because lenders, as Michelle said, are risk averse and they don't like being tied to a lease because ultimately, if someone doesn't pay their mortgage, they don't want to have someone in there. They want to sell it. That's what they want to do. They sell property. They don't retain property. But I think the main one I've found when I've tried to look for these to bring on is that you are based on yield again. So even though you're buying a residential property, which you think, you know, I'll get some growth, you're actually paying more than what the property is worth.
Because you're buying that yield, aren't you?
Well, sometimes the returns have been added on to the price, haven't we?
Ultimately,
that we've seen, you know, that 3-year guarantee period you've been given has actually been added on, and you're paying for it yourself.
And that's most of it. Not to say it's not forceful on the fact is, but you can have a lot safer options for the yield that you get. I think that's the main thing.
But I mean, there are a lot of funds out there, in fairness, though, that do specifically buy housing associations and do extremely well from it. So, maybe just speaking out loud, maybe it is more of a fun type thing to buy
because they're massively very well orientated, aren't they? They'll work on 6%. Anything that gives them 6%, they'll buy. And so I think as a long-term, mid-long-term investment, which all properties should be seen as, unless you are going through the buy, refurb, flip, if you're hands-on, which is fine, if you can find those properties now and build costs are very high, never anti that, but it's not something we deal with. I just think when you look at mid-long-term, it's very stunted, this, and if there are other options out there, and I think that's why we wanted to highlight this, because some things can look very appealing on paper, can't they? But they do have more concerns than others. And certainly if you're in that bracket of having under 100 grand cash, this will be an option that looks very appealing. So I would suggest just having a chat and saying, right, okay, let's discuss what options I've got for this, and then see what works best for you.
Absolutely. So anything we've just covered on there, and you've got any questions or anything like that, please do let us know either now or after the webinar. Episode a question come in. Are off-plan new build apartments generally yield-based? Is growth realistic?
Location again, Greg. There's some areas where we have sold off-plan. Off-plan, going back to what we said, off-plan is a bit hard now because build costs have gone up so much more. So we try and focus a little bit now on completed, don't we? And refurbs. But
this is kind of our job, really, to make sure developers don't take advantage of this. It's a really good question, and sometimes I've seen it where developers do look at the end goal and look at maybe take short-term lets and see the potential yields, and then add that onto the price. We will always strip that back, and I know a lot of other agents do as well. It's not just us. We will always look at it. What is its actual market value? Forget what it's going to be used for and the potential that way.
And for buying off plan, there's a risk reward. There is a risk buying off plan, and for a buyer, they should get something for that risk. So if someone comes to us and said, right, okay, completed, these properties are going to be worth 200,000, well, we're going to say off plan, you should be selling them for 160 then, because that's that's why you need to be buying. You want to, at the end of the day, see some profits for that, because that's
2-year build program,
and that's it, where you put money in, where you're not getting any physical comeback for it. You want then some equity, and even though if you buy it in mortgage, you'll only ever price it at what you bought it for. But 6 months down the line, that's when you can draw your money out. So off plan in the same way is the same as buying a property, refurbing it, and then flipping it. But you're not doing the work. But you're not doing the work. That's how it should work.
I think it touches maybe what we were talking about, maybe in Manchester with that, that 2-bed at 400, 450. Is that a good buy? And for an owner-occupier, absolutely.
If they want to pay it,
they're fantastic properties. I know them. They're the one I'm thinking of. But it doesn't work on the investment model.
That's all.
And I think to answer that question, it's a difficult one to answer, because it's all about what you buy into. And if you look at some of the developments we've sold in the past, 4 years on, 5 years on, there's a good growth in there. Like to say Adelphi, 140,000, 250,000 today, 110,000.
And that's the key. Adelphi is in Manchester. So when we've been talking about Manchester, 4 or 5 years ago, we're selling there when the growth was there.
Yes.
But it's, I use a phrase, don't I? If you're hearing about something all the time, then you like what it's like going to a party when everyone's already leaving. So we have, over the last 3 or 4 years, focused on secondary or tertiary places, which are in good locations outside big cities, because that's where people are wanting to live now and rent. So these are the ones with growth. We don't want to go to areas that have already seen the peak, where you're ultimately paying the highest price possible for those lowest yields that you get. And that's what we try and do, rather than just say, this looks nice and pretty, let's sell it, because someone thinks it's worth this. We want you to say, right, okay, I get this, I get the story behind it. So yes, is the answer, Greg. It's just, again, letting companies like us do the research and prove to you that we've done the work behind it and where you are.
No, absolutely. So back onto sort of the news section and the cost of living crisis, which we've all seen,
experienced.
We've all experienced it. And it's all on the news at the moment. So we've seen rising council tax, rising energy bills, rising fuel costs. I suppose it kind of looks back at the benefits of having an AST property. A lot of the time, the tenants will fork out those costs. It won't be you as the landlord. But for those of you, I suppose, who maybe have a short-term let property, who maybe, you are going to absorb that cost yourselves. we've in particular been looking the last few months of ways of helping to reduce those utility bills. You know, me personally with a short-term let property, and we kind of bumped into this company really, Inspire Home Automation Limited, at a property show in London a couple of months back, who've specialised in this and building certain equipment that can help reduce energy bills by money-saving smart thermostats. So the guys over there have produced us a video. It's about 10 minutes long, but it's really worth watching, whether you have a short-term let already property or you're potentially looking at one. This is a really interesting thing to have a look at, how you can potentially reduce that.
I think if you've got portfolio properties now or HMO as well and things like that, it's worth looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're going to play out this video. I think Jason's going to put it on now.
Everyone, and thank you for joining me in this virtual webinar on smart heating controls for the bills on included market. My name is Georgina Ritchie and I'm the Business Development Manager here at Inspire Home Automation. Here at Inspire, we develop, manufacture and sell smart thermostats, and we are passionate about what we do. We love to educate our customers and receive their feedback to find more ways to help them save money. With energy prices due to rise soon, now is the time to invest in a thermostat for your properties to help you stay in control of the cost of your heating bills. Let's take a look at how these rises will be affecting everyone. So here I've accumulated some information from different websites, obviously BBC's Twitter account. They're advertising, well, not advertising, stating that the typical energy bill will rise by £3,549 a year. Now that's an average. And basically, if we look at the cap rates and we look at this lovely breakdown that the BBC have done, showing a low, medium, high over the different types of properties, these are all based on residential units. You as landlords are dealing with your tenants who really don't pay the bill, so they're not energy conscious. So they have a tendency of turning that heating up, leaving it higher, going out for the day, maybe just opening their windows instead of turning down the thermostat, leaving you with very high bills. So looking at these costs on the right-hand side where it says 2,400, that's for a family or maybe a couple. Okay, so these costs could actually be a lot more for you. So if you do not have the right equipment in your property to control your heating, those costs could be considerably higher than what's stated on here. So please bear that in mind as we continue through the slides. So before we go through what we're going to be covering today, I just want to stipulate that we are going to be talking about smart thermostats. We're going to be talking about our landlord thermostat and our calendar thermostat. But should you have any questions, please take a note. We'll be at the end of the slides, you'll be able to see our contact details, how to get in contact with us, our website address and everything else like that. But if you are impatient, and I understand that, if you're busy and you want to talk to us quickly, then please visit our website, www.inspirehomeautomation.co.uk. That's www.inspirehomeautomation.co.uk. Once you visit our website, okay, you'll see a chat icon in the bottom right-hand corner. Click on that and leave us a message or start talking with an agent. So what we're going to do is just to go over what we're going to be covering. So we're going to go over who we are, what type of thermostats are available on the market, how does our thermostats work and why are they unique versus others in the market, what solutions to suit any setup, our product range, okay, so depending whether you've got electric systems, how much could I save, and the future. What's the future of Inspire? So who we are, where it all began. So before the days of Nest and Hive thermostats, so this is over 10 years ago, two energy-conscious brothers, Matt and Gavin Smith, one being an electrical engineer, the other a software engineer, were on the family day out and thought, wouldn't it be great if we could actually switch the heating off or switch it on from a distance? So this particular time, they're out with the family, it's really cold, it's December. Being energy conscious, they switched it off and they thought, I'd love to switch it back on and be warmer for when we arrive home. And that's where the idea was born for a smart thermostat. Now, the idea was to create a thermostat that can be controlled from a distance using the internet. From this came our first prototype, and after time, our initial thermostat, the NS1001 was born, which I've got an image on the left-hand side here for you to see our first smart thermostat. Now, this was discontinued in 2017, and since 2017, we've had the Ignite range, which is widely available to view on our website. So after we launched the NS1001, we had a lot of landlords approach us saying, we need it to do this, you know, we need it to be adapted for this, you know, and we then went through their difficulties, and this is where we created the landlord thermostat. And that's how we've adapted it into our range to support our landlords. And since then, we've actually developed even further to create the calendar thermostat for holiday let and service accommodation industry. Our product capabilities, as I said, has been built from feedback from our customers. We're always looking at cost-effective ways to keep our customers getting back control of their heating. So we're going to look at the thermostats, you know, the manual ones versus programmable versus smart thermostats. So I've done a little brief here just so that you've got an oversight of what the type of thermostats you usually generally find in a residential property. So as you can see, you've got the manual thermostat. Most of us recognise that from when we were younger in the 80s, you know, turnstile, turn it up when you want the heating to go up and turn it down and it just clicks. Has all those different functionalities. I'm not going to go through all of them because we've all used it before. Same with a programmable thermostat. You tend to only have a certain amount of periods that you can set within a period of day. You've got the boost facility holiday mode, quite simple, okay, but everything, both of those have to be controlled at the thermostat. Okay, they are not smart. And finally, we've got an example of a Nest here. So a Nest can be remotely controlled via the internet, via your app. You've got geolocation, temperature notifications. You can set up between 5 and 8 set points in a 24-hour period. And you set up several programs, boost facility, learn habits. Again, that's great, but it's not tamper-proof. The tenant still can override the settings. Okay, you need to micromanage that if you're a landlord, because you are not at the property. This is fine if it's in your home where you're going to be walking past it every day and you can make changes. But in general, this can be overridden. Okay, just like any of these, you can set these up to however you want. You can put boxes over them, but the tenants can still get access. So what does an Aspire thermostat? How does it work? Okay, what makes us unique? So we've just seen those thermostats there. They're functional. Okay, ours is very functional. So with ours, you've got the remote setup and access just like a Hive and Nest. Okay, so with ours, you cannot program anything at the thermostat. So this thermostat here, this very good looking thermostat with the smart sensor, you cannot program anything on that thermostat. Okay, you need to have it connected to the internet, added to your account before you can set that up. This makes it completely secure, meaning that the tenants cannot override the settings. Nobody can. Okay, without your authorization. It's fully lockable, so you can choose what access they have to the thermostat. You see all these buttons. Theoretically, they can be all locked, but you need to legally give them some form of access as per your HMO licensing or, you know, council licensing. So it's always best to check that to see what the minimum maximum temperatures are. There is a clause in different licensings that says if it's -1 outside, the tenants should have the capability to turn the heating up to 20, 21, 22 degrees. So most of our landlords, to stay legal, they put their boost at that highest temperature and they can choose whether that goes on for 15 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes. Like I said, all our timing is customizable within 15-minute slots for the boost. So you can restrict some functions, tamper alerts, customizable boosts. So that means you can choose whatever temperature, whatever time period. You have 4 heating programs. Okay, that's 4 of them to set up, and you can label them whatever you want to call and easily switch them on your account. You have detailed reporting. So, for instance, Hive, they have detailed reporting, but you've got to pay a subscription fee. Ours comes as standard, and we hold a year's worth of data for you. So you can actually look back over the last weeks, the last months, and see, as you can see on this graph here, that's an example of how many times they boosted the heating based on the graph information here. This blue line is reading the temperature within property. You can actually zoom in on that data. And those pink lines in the background, those light pink lines, are actually the boiler coming on. That's the call for heat. So you can actually see how often your boiler is actually coming on within a certain period that you select. So you can print a custom manual from your account. So again, once you set up the thermostat, you've chosen how they're going to operate it. You can print off a custom manual to give the tenants to show them how they can use it. Now, the beauty of our system is that you can add up to 100 thermostats to one account. No one else does that. Hive is a maximum of 5. Nest has up to 5. Hive, you can only have 1 email registered to a thermostat and that's it. You can't re-register it. With our system, you can re-register those thermostats by transferring them to the new owner. They set up an account, transfer it over. So if you've got a rent-to-rent and you're selling, or you're deciding to sell one of your properties, you know you can actually pass that on to somebody else. Now, with our system, you can then adapt it with this thermostat to have smart sensors. These smart sensors are great. They do 3 things. They measure temperature wherever you locate them. So if you decide to put them upstairs, downstairs, or every room, that gives you the opportunity from your online account to either run the heating from the thermostat temperature, the sensor temperature, or the average temperature between all devices. They work as a network. It's also got humidity detection. So if high humidities lead to bacterial growth, worst case scenario mold, that will let you know. It won't control your heating, but you'll get a notification. You can read it with your separate graph online. And lastly, it does motion. No motion detected, it will turn your heating down. So effectively switching it off. So as you can see, our system is fully customizable. It is there to help you save as much money as possible. And we've got a dedicated team here to look at your situation and see what would be the best setup. So we've just gone through the landlord thermostat there. This is a calendar thermostat. So the calendar thermostat is for the service accommodation, holiday lets, village halls, anywhere where you're going to be taking a booking. So in this instance, with this thermostat, it's got all the benefits of the landlord thermostat that we just went through, fully customizable. But this one, you can link it to your channel manager or calendar using iCal. So what you would do is you would export the iCal from either the calendar or the channel manager. You would then put that into our system, and our system will pull all those bookings down. And what that means is that your heating is only available for when you have a booking. That's right, when you have a booking. You can choose how soon before or after that check-in, or same when they check out, before or after that heating stops and gets switched off, and it's all done automatically. So a very popular product, saves a lot of time. So solutions to suit any setup, our product range. So we like to say that our system, we will try to adapt to any system out there. So conventional boilers, system boilers, combi boilers, electric boilers, gas, oil, electric heat pumps. We will look at all of that and see how our system can work. But one thing we do not do is smart TRVs. That's smart thermostatic radiator valves. We have not found a solution yet for the bills all included market to make it tamper-proof, batteries last longer. There's a lot of different caveats that we're trying to get around, but we are in the process of developing. Same, we don't do open window and door sensors, because in a HMO environment, if somebody opens a window in one room, you don't want the whole house getting cold and getting complaints. So we're looking at other different solutions to try and see how we can eradicate that. So how much could I save with energy prices going up even more? So in August 2021, we stated after installation that our landlords saved on average of £213 per year, okay, per property on their energy bill. So effectively, in around about a year, the thermostat will pay itself back. Now, with any energy bills rising consistently, we are currently building in case studies and found this could be not much more, considerably more. Some customers are reporting that the thermostat is paying itself back within a couple of months. That's how much they have had lost control of their heating. So things we can help with: best setup, you know, looking at where the thermostat can go. You know, what have you got in your property? Have you got zone systems, zoned heating? We can cover all the bases of that. Positioning, have you got the best positioning? We tend to put the thermostat in the coldest place in the house, but when it comes to a HMO, for instance, you want to put it in a living room if you've got a separate one, because that's going to replicate the heat within the house. Same with positioning. A thermostat must be positioned in a room where there's a radiator, and that radiator, thermostatic radiator valve, TRV, needs to be removed so the tenants can't manipulate the heat around the thermostat. Because again, if you're set to 2, the maximum flow of water is going to allow through that radiator is up to 16 degrees, which means if you're trying to heat the house to 20 degrees, your boiler is going to be on consistently through that set point. So that is a good starting point to start saving money. The best products the most expensive product in our range doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the most effective for your setup. So depending on your customers and what you're trying to achieve, we can recommend the best, most cost-effective kit for you. We have a dedicated UK support team as well as a dedicated UK sales team. Everything is done in-house. We don't outsource anything, and you can't buy our products from anyone else. You can only buy them direct. Everything is made in the UK. So this helps you cut down on your CO2 emissions, so doing your bit for the environment. Together, our customers have saved more than 25 tonnes of CO2, over 5 million in heating costs. That's amazing figures, guys, okay? So all our thermostats are Boiler Plus compatible. They're all made in the UK, here in Dorset. I've got a bit more information here on the landlord and calendar thermostat, so you can just quickly see how it works on the website and where to find it. You can book a 30-minute consultation with us. That's 30 minutes to spend with an agent to talk about your setup and your portfolio and how we can help you save money. We have something called Inspire College on our website, bite-sized videos on how to set up your account. We always advise the customers to go in there. And again, Our business is built on feedback. So if you don't like what you see or you find a problem, let us know, because we'd love to fix it. And you can always contact us. Visit our website, click support, and underneath there you'll find different ways that you're able to contact us within the office. So that was a brief overview of what we do at Inspire Home Automation. We're here to save you money on your heating bills. If you want to find out more, there's our contact details in front of you. I'd recommend taking a screenshot. You can contact us via telephone, website, or via email. Okay, on the website, you can actually start an online chat. So thank you for watching. Please don't hesitate to contact us to find out more, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
So thank you very much, Georgina, for that. Hopefully everyone watching found that really interesting. It's something everyone's going to be keeping an eye on going forward as bills continue to go on.
I think you're right, Mike.
Yeah. So I think Jason's put a link on there to Inspire Home. So if you want any more details, feel free to get in touch with them directly, or you can let us know and we will make the introduction on it. So I think it's time for a little bit of fun on the webinar. First time we've done this.
It is.
So
yes.
Hopefully it works. Jason, I believe he's going to come on screen now, and we're going to do a live draw to win an Apple AirTag.
And here he is.
And Jason's going to tell us exactly what an Apple AirTag is.
I try. Good evening. Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. It's fallen on me to be the technical one, I believe. So taking the description from the Apple website, an AirTag is a super easy way to keep track of your stuff. Attach one to your keys, wallet, or backpack, and just like that, they're on your radar in the Find My app, where you can also track down your Apple devices and keep up with friends and family. You can play a sound on the built-in speaker or say, "Hey Siri, find my wallet." If it's hiding nearby, like under the sofa or in the next room, just follow the sound and your search is over. So as Mike said, a little bit of fun. We're going to do a very quick live draw. We've put all the names of everybody that registered and that came on live at some point into the Wheel of Fortune. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work. Here we go.
Can we win this, Jace, or are we not included?
Absolutely not, no. But you can certainly buy one. So hopefully you can see that.
There we are.
Yeah,
I'm hoping. Right, so we've got all the names put in there. I'm hoping this works. So let's go. Spin the wheel.
Is that Michael McIntyre? Spin the
wheel.
Spin the wheel.
Yeah. So we're not going to sing and dance.
No. All on the floor with pointing towards it.
So there we are, Girish Agarwal. We have a winner, Girish. We've got your email address. We've got your details. We will contact you by email, get your address, and get that sent out to you. So thank you very much all for... in fact, let me stop sharing. There we go. Knew there was going to be slight technical difficulties, but there we go. Thank you all very much for joining. A little bit of fun there. Girish will contact you in the morning, and we'll have another giveaway on the next webinar next month. So I'm going to leave you to finish up now. I'm going to take my ugly mug away.
He said it, not us. Congratulations, Girish. As Jason says, we will get that sent out to you as well. You're going to buy one, Andrew?
Well,
what's that?
I'm still not quite sure what it is.
I mean, when we send it out, we should at least know it gets there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's got a tracker on it.
Yeah, a tracker on it.
So yeah, and it's just a bit of fun. We'll have something new every month as well, a new different prize on it. So that concludes the first episode of Pulse on Property. Thank you very much for everyone who joined us. Hopefully you found it interesting. We welcome any feedback. And likewise, if there's anything you think it's worth us touching on the next episode, please do let us know. We want it to be topical on it as well. And likewise, if you'd like to speak to one of the team, one of the consultants, or one of the management companies, please do let us know. You can book a consultation where they can talk through your own particular strategy.
Or any particular of those letting options. You know, there's a lot more to go into. We just try to give a brief overview.
Yeah, no, that's it. No, thank you very much, Andrew and Paul.
Thank you. Good night
for joining. Yes. Yeah, and we'll leave you to the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye now.
Bye bye.